Hey everybody in the Mommy Berries community. We're here to talk about pushing. And I'm just making sure I'm all set up here to receive your comments and your questions. And at any point in this, if you have questions, please do post them because I do this for you and I want to make sure that you are having your questions answered to the best of my ability. I This is a controversial topic, pushing a baby out. It's starting to get a lot more mention, and I'm hoping to be able to clarify some things maybe that you've heard about. I want to make sure, though, from the very beginning that I clarify I am not a birth professional. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a midwife. I'm not a doula. I'm not present for births. What I do bring to this, I've been to two births, both my own vaginal births. So I do bring personal experience. I'm a physical therapist. And so I bring experience about the body. I understand the body. I understand the muscles involved in having a vaginal birth. I understand the nervous system and how that fits into everything. And I bring a lot of clinical experience. The majority of my caseload is pregnant and postpartum moms, and I do a lot of birth prep. And so I talk to women before they have a baby, and we talk about what it's going to be like to have a baby or what it could be like. And I talk to a lot of them after. So I get a lot of feedback. And I've learned a lot from that. I am always keen to reach out to people that are involved in the process. OBGYNs, midwives, doulas, and if any of you are watching, I very much welcome your feedback. And in any way, if you think that this would be something, that contributes to your practice too, please do reach out because I love to collaborate. With that said, I would love for any of you listening, tell me, is this something that you're here with me live or are you watching the recording? And I always like to gain that knowledge because I know what time of day to try posting these things when I see kind of how many people are able to show up live. And I would love to be able to answer things on the go. So please do, as I mentioned, post your questions when you have them. I also want to know, after you tell me whether this is a replay watch or a live watch for you, I want to know, have you already pushed out a baby? Did you have a vaginal birth and you have questions that you want answered? Or do you feel like, or is this something that you're working up to? You know that you have a vaginal birth in your horizon and you're wanting to learn more. So let me just go a little, I just want to make sure that I'm getting your comments here, you guys. I am not, okay. I am not an expert on technology, so I always worry that I don't have this kind of flowing. You guys, first I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I teach, and then I'll talk about where some of the controversy comes. Now, in a vaginal birth, you've probably seen from my posts before, babies come out of a hole. This is kind of weird how this is set up here. A hole in the vaginal opening. Okay, so babies come out of a hole in the pelvic floor. Can anybody comment for me and just say, like, are you able to comment? Can you write something and say, I'm here live, or this is my question? Please let me know that this is something that you can hear me talking about. Babies come out of a hole in the pelvic floor, and a lot of women come to see me during their pregnancy because they've heard that there's things they can do to prepare their pelvic floor. Okay. And I think everybody's starting to hear that it's not just about Kegels. It's not just about tightening and having a strong pelvic floor to push your baby out. It's about knowing how to connect with those muscles to allow them to relax. Because after all, it is your uterus, when it's time to have a baby, that will contract to push a baby out of the vagina tube and out of the pelvic floor. So learning what it feels like to tighten and relax those muscles is very helpful in being able to connect with the area. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail about the actual like prepping of the pelvic floor because that's something that I'm either going to do with you individually or we'll do in another session. This is not about that. But where I start clients is, like I said, feeling like they feel the difference of relax and tighten, and how they see that, for example, the anus muscles help to control the relaxation of the vaginal muscles. So if you think of tightening your anus, you'll also notice that it tightens your vaginal opening. If you think about softening your tailbone, you'll notice that it softens your area around your vagina too. So being able to learn what those muscles feel like. And you also hear, am I like, I don't really want to poop. Like, I really don't want to poop during my birth. So how do I control my anus muscles to tighten, but I let my vagina relax? You guys, they're all the same muscles. You want to think about letting everything go. So we do a lot of first just visualization and understanding. I often do a vaginal exam during pregnancy so that I can give them direct feedback as to what does it feel like when you're contracting those muscles? What does it feel like when you're relaxing those muscles? And how can I give you cues to help you feel more in tune? Okay. I always tell people to picture that their baby's actually coming out of this big hole, so they understand that they're all connected, and influencing any of them is very positive in relaxing the pelvic floor. And so I send them home working on what it feels like to not only tighten and relax, but spend a lot of time in relaxation so that they feel that that's very quickly accessible to them. Okay. And I tell them to do this in different positions so that they're ready for anything and everything, and notice that different positions feel different. Okay. And then generally when they come back and they tell me how they feel, sometimes like, you know what, Melissa, I don't really feel like I'm great at relaxing. Like, I feel, better at the contracting, but I feel like my anus doesn't relax very well, or my tailbone doesn't relax very well. And so, and so sometimes I do a vaginal exam again, and I show them sometimes something as simple as thinking about their breathing can influence this more. I'll teach them how, look at how you breathe into your shoulder blades. You get a nice relaxation of your pelvic floor. Look at how you breathe into your belly and your low back, that your pelvic floor relaxes. Okay. So first, I just want them to be like, oh, that's what relaxation feels like. And then I show them, because when you relax everything above the pelvic floor relaxes. Then I show them, look at when you bring your rib cage in and you bring your belly in, like contract your abs, and you make your breathing really shallow and fast. Do you feel how your pelvic floor tightens? And they say, yeah. And I can feel that inside, that as soon as they start breathing shallow and breathing panicky, that their pelvic floor tightens. Okay. And that's where some of the pressure comes in. I can't see the comments. I can't, you guys. Sorry. I'm just being notified here that I cannot see your comments. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry, you guys. Comment moderation. Give me 1 second. I don't know what to do here. Hold on. Someone's telling me what to do. I will relay. Okay. So what was I talking about? Okay, so I can feel when I'm inside, I can feel what things they're doing are creating kind of like a softening or a tightening. I'm gonna have to go back and answer your questions later, you guys. I'm really apologize. Technology is not my strong suit, and it, like, getting onto these lives is like a lot of anxiety for me because it just never seems to work. Um, uh, anyways, so once they have the awareness and they're like, oh my God, I've never thought of these muscles before, then I feel like we can take it one step further and start talking about, okay, now if you think about, this is where the where do I push thing comes in. Like, they'll notice that, okay, if I think about having a poop, I poop out of this probably once a day, and I pee out of this hole once a day. And the vagina, the baby hole, just happens to be in the middle of those. So once they kind of understand, oh my God, like when I control one, I can control the other, or I understand how they all go together. Then they understand I get where I'm supposed to push. And this is where I tell people to practice relaxation on the toilet and just know that the baby hole is very much related to the pee hole and the poop hole. So practicing the relaxation on the toilet before can be very beneficial. When when I'm inside, feeling their pelvic floor, we start talking about, okay, now I want to go through the different ways that you might be instructed to push. And I show them first. One of the most common ways you will be instructed to push is to bear down, hold your breath, and push. Okay, so I say, do that. And what they describe, and try this right now when you're listening to me, is you'll notice that it creates pressure in a lot of different directions. It goes up to your head, it goes out to your shoulders, and it makes your pelvic floor close. And I can feel as soon as they do that, I kind of get a clamp on my finger. Okay, it closes. That is the pelvic floor's response to tension. Because you guys, every time we cough or sneeze, it's like pressure. Do you see that? Like, or like it's pressure, just like holding your breath, and the pelvic floor instinctively tightens in response to that. So in some ways you're kind of like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why are we told to hold our breath and push? Okay, so first I want them to show that this is a really common way you will be coached to do it. Then I show them how to think about directing their pressure down to the baby opening with a different way. I usually say, I want you to try to exhale so that you're not accumulating all that pressure. Because you know what? A lot of times that pressure can be like, like almost like burst blood vessels in the eyes, worsening hemorrhoids, prolapse. Like pressure is not our body's friend. And so even though it can be an effective way to like bear down and get a baby out, the body doesn't always naturally respond great to that. I always say, think about an exhale. Abs, directing pressure down to a soft opening, because we've practiced that. They know what that feels like. And right away you can see their eyes are just like, oh my God, that feels easier. That feels more instinctual. And so I tell them though, like, again, I say, okay, I just presented you with option A and option B. Like you can see they're different. But you might be coached to do either one. And then we go back to option A and I show them, can you try to override that? Now that you know how to control your pelvic floor, can you try to override that instinctual tension and create softness? Okay, so when you are trying to, if they ask you to bear down, I want you to notice that you can still create some softness down there. You can visualize the hole, you can visualize the muscles, you know what it feels like to relax them. So can you do that? And the reason I find it beneficial to teach both, I mean, in my head, especially like I feel this on all these women, and it is like a no-brainer to me that we would teach women to more breathe out, because breathing is the best way to calm the nervous system, keep us calm. Like if we're telling someone to relax, do we ever tell them to hold their breath? No, we tell them to breathe. And so it's a good way to not only kind of keep ourselves in check or keep ourselves relaxed, but I can feel the effects of the hole that the baby's coming out of. So it seems like a no-brainer. However, I'll tell you first my personal experience. I went in kind of knowing all of this to my second birth. I was oblivious my first. And I, of course, like I didn't go in and say, I'm a pelvic floor physio and I know everything about this. I just didn't say, because I don't know, I didn't feel confident. And I did my thing. I breathed and I did everything that I felt like I, had taught myself. And they kept telling Melissa, you're doing it wrong. Hold your breath, hold your breath, hold your breath. And, I kind of just respectfully ignored them because I felt like I was doing a pretty good job. However, it got to the point where my baby wouldn't come out and my baby was in distress. And I could tell that I just needed something different. Like what I was doing wasn't working, my breathing and my pushing down. So I held my breath and push, but I didn't do that for hours on end. That helped me get my baby out. And so it definitely kind of opened my eyes to there's not one way. And I think it's very valuable for everybody to know there's not one way, because otherwise you're always going to come out feeling like, oh my God, I did it wrong, or I'm doing it wrong. And there's nothing worse than that. And I think that there's so much gray in it, even though it doesn't maybe feel naturally. Maybe you need to switch it up every other push or something like that, because sometimes our body just needs something different. And so not only do I teach it because I think sometimes it is black and white and you might need to try something different, but I hear a lot of women obviously come and say, okay, well, I've heard all this from all these people talking about how relaxing is a better way to push, but my care provider kept telling me to do it the other way, and I didn't feel confident not listening to them. And so that's another thing. I just think that you should like respect that there's sometimes reasons that they need to tell you to do it, a different way. And I think that if you explain what, like, this is your body, and you are entitled to quote unquote do what you want, but talk about it, whether it be before or during, and just say, I'd like to try this, and try it, because you do have that right. But also understand that sometimes they maybe know something that they're not telling you. Maybe they're asking you to do something because they see a way your baby is coming out, and they want you to try something different. So again, I just want to keep it always gray, so that people don't feel there's a right or a wrong, because a lot of the feedback I get after is, I practiced and practiced and practiced option A, and then all I was presented was option B, and I was pissed off because it wasn't what I had practiced. Or people will say, like, I didn't feel like I was presented with both options. You should educate yourself and just know there are both options, but do also respect that sometimes there's a time and a place for different things. I wanted to bring in the research because, again, I mean, sometimes you're like, okay, well, why? To me, it makes so much sense to do the more easygoing, if you would say, like, breath, and listen to your body and push when it wants to, and think about pushing with ease. But I couldn't help but say, like, what does the research say? And there's not a lot of research with pregnant and postpartum women. You can imagine it's a hard group to do research on, but there's a few things that I found interesting. There was this one, it's a literature review, so they looked at some other papers, and they looked at the downside of purple pushing, or like holding your breath to push, or sometimes you'll hear it closed glottis pushing. And what they found in this review in 2009 is that it made fetal and maternal, so baby and mom, distress higher, which kind of makes sense. That, like, when you hold your breath, that you're kind of limiting the oxygen supply. And you know what it's like when you hold your breath. Does that feel relaxing? No. Increased perineal trauma. So it's like, again, well, why do you think, if that makes sense? Like, if you're closing the hole and trying to drive a baby out, could you see how maybe there'd be more perineal trauma? And that it didn't change the second stage of labor, meaning that it didn't make it any faster. And I think that if you look at why a lot of women are coached to push as soon as they are fully dilated, is to kind of speed up the process, not only to keep mom's energy maybe in mind, but also they just want to make sure baby gets out safely. So when they looked at, does this actually make it go faster? They just didn't find that there was a change in whether women just kind of pushed spontaneously, or whether whether they held their breath or didn't. Okay, so I thought to me, that was like, oh, well, then why aren't we adopting that? Like, why aren't we adopting the breath and like slower pushing? Then I found another review back from 2017, so more recent, and they compared both spontaneous and directed pushing. So they like want mom feeling ready to push, and mom being directed to push as soon as she's dilated. Okay, and that's definitely how I was coached. As soon as I was fully dilated, I was coached to start pushing, even though I didn't necessarily have the urge. Okay, so that's kind of the difference. They looked at that, and they looked at I'm actually not going to talk about the other parts, just don't want to get into that. But they showed, like, the evidence wasn't overly compelling, in that it wasn't overly, like, it was low to moderate quality evidence, okay? And they really didn't find a big difference in that pushing, like whether or not women were directed or weighted. So you can kind of see how it makes it gray, right? There's different ways to coach, and that's why I think it is beneficial to learn both ways and then figure out what way works for you. That's why I teach both, because the research isn't black and white. No births are black and white, and you should go into it feeling like you have options. Okay, just like I say, practice different positions. I would practice different strategies for pushing, and yeah, I mean, that's my, I think those are my main take homes. And I I would highly suggest that I find that the women, the feedback that if if I poll a lot of the women, and I should actually write this down, but if I poll them and I ask them, the ones that are kind of feeling prepared going into birth, I always say to them, please send me a message after and let me know how it goes, because I use a lot of your feedback to help better improve like my teaching. And I would say the ones that describe the most blissful births, one thing that they have in common is they all say, I practiced. I practiced breathing. I practiced how my breathing influenced my relaxation and my pelvic floor opening. I practiced being in tune with those muscles. I practiced option A and practiced option B, and I just felt in control and I trusted my body. Because I think that I remember my first birth and going into it oblivious. I didn't know any of this. And I remember thinking like, oh, women before me have had babies. This is going to be straightforward. And I was actually really floored. I didn't have a clue how to push. I didn't really know anything about positioning. Um, and I would say that it could have gone a lot better. The second time around, I knew all of this, and you know what? The outcome wasn't much different. I had to have an episiotomy. I had tearing. I had a fairly traumatic birth, but I still felt like I did everything I could. I used a variety of positions. I used a variety of different pushing techniques. Um, I felt like I trusted my body, and I mean, nothing always comes out perfect. I felt confident in what to do after too. I'm just seeing if someone has. Um, Okay, someone's sending me some questions here, you guys. So I'm gonna answer them through my phone, okay? After two, yeah. I'm gonna have to figure this out better for next time. Um, okay, guys. I'm gonna answer your questions now. Before I answer your questions, actually, I want to talk quickly about an epidural. I think I might address that in an upcoming session. I actually might interview um, a few people about epidurals. But what I wanted to say is that a lot of people say, like, will I be able to still push effectively when I have an epidural? I actually had an epidural both times, and I know that there's a lot of fear around epidurals. In my case, they worked like a hot damn. They helped me relax and therefore relax my body and my pelvic floor. And I felt like even though I couldn't feel contractions, I had still practiced my body awareness. So I knew where I had to push, I knew what those muscles were doing, and I knew how to use my muscles above my pelvic floor to draw pressure down. And so I'm not telling you to have an epidural. I'm just saying that having an epidural doesn't negate everything that you've worked on. It sometimes can help. It sometimes can help, definitely. But again, I would say that the body awareness is the key thing before, so that even if you can't feel, it's like having a poop. Like even if I took away your sensation to have a poop, you've had a poop so many times that muscle memory is there. Okay, here is a question someone had. I had a 5-hour labor and baby practically fell out at the end. Sweet. However, my body about halfway through labor just wanted to push. I was trying to breathe through it, but I couldn't stop. I probably did that for about half an hour. My body was so tense and my breathing went out the window. I know my neck's both completely different. How can I stay relaxed during that time when my body's taking over? You know what? I think that it, would you say though, okay, you're saying that that's not a good thing. I mean, I'm just wondering if you had trauma because it came out fast. Like I think that's something that you like, that we don't maybe learn, is that uterus does have the ability to contract and push a baby down. Like that's what I would say. Sometimes the point that a lot of these people, a lot of people make is that we don't need to work so hard to push, that our baby does know how to come out, that our uterus does know how to let that baby out. And you're right, the more you can breathe and kind of work with the process, feel the process, and the best you can. You can't always stop pain, but I always teach people, like, you can't necessarily change the input, you can change the output. You can think about creating, instead of pain and tension, creating softness. And so sometimes you do want to push, like that, once your body's kind of thinking about it coming down, sequentially down, and once you do get down to a certain point, it's not bad to push, right? I think sometimes we're coached to push before we have the urge. So I hope that answers your question. There's nothing wrong with pushing. I think, like I said, if you don't have an urge, I think that's sometimes where the controversy comes, is like, did I need to push if my body wasn't ready to? And absolutely, I think that a lot of the feedback I get too after is, Melissa, I had all these visuals in my head of relaxed, soft, and open and breathing. But once I got to it, I could, like, my body took over and I was just in, shock or whatever. Absolutely. Sometimes that happens too. And that doesn't mean you've necessarily lost control. I can relate to that. That's exactly how I felt. Nothing that I had worked on was working. And so that's why an epidural helped me. But yeah, I mean, you won't necessarily stay in absolute control every time, and that's why I think that trusting your body is very beneficial. Should I stay relaxed through that? I think when you say here, like, how do I stay relaxed through all that? I think that sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And if your breathing's not working, is there something else you can do? And I think this is where sometimes people start talking about, like, rhythmical movement, where whether your pelvis is rocking side to side, like anything that you can do to take that brain and relax it, because so much of kind of pelvic floor relaxation or muscle relaxation is tied into nervous system relaxation. And that's where I think that the more you can prepare beforehand, whether it be breathing techniques, meditation techniques, visualization techniques, and that's something that a lot of women that I would say, are very satisfied with their birth story. They do say that I practiced relaxing, I practiced positive thoughts, I trusted my body, I keep telling myself I could do it. And there is a difference between, I see a difference in those women coming in versus the ones that are like, oh my God, I'm like 10 out of 10 nervous and I'm like not sleeping at night, I'm so worried about this. I think whatever you can do to prepare your mind and your body and your ability to relax your brain and relax your breathing, it's not going to serve you wrong. It's all about kind of having an awareness or an access to that, if that makes sense. Okay. Like I mentioned, I am going to continue putting out some more information on this topic because I know that it is one that a lot of people want to talk about. I would love to, I'm going to touch base with some midwives and physicians in my community and see if I can convince them to come on and have a chat about this. I also want you to consider that before you work too much on the pushing, I'd highly suggest connecting with a therapist that is able to help you learn about the anatomy of a birth and being able to connect, because there's nothing I think more beneficial than that. I work myself in Kelowna at Wave Physio. I am happy to see you. And I also do online sessions that can be very beneficial because I can give you tips. I've done lots of sessions with people without doing an internal exam because I can describe to you, when we're done this call, I want you to put your finger in your vagina and I want you to feel X, Y, and Z. Or I want you to put, hold on a second. I have another question here coming in. I'll finish my thought and then I'll answer this question. I want you to, totally lost my thought now. I want you to feel like, okay, I know what I was going to say, put your finger in your vagina, or look with a mirror. I want you to look down there with a mirror and see, like, okay, this is what happens when I tighten my pelvic floor. This is what happens when I relax. Perineal massage ties in quite nicely, you guys, to pushing, because perineal massage, you'll be working on the muscles that let a baby out. And for me, perineal massage isn't necessarily about trying to stretch it. It's not about stretching the muscles to the size of a baby's head, but more kind of feeling what those muscles feel like, and how to be in tune with them. So um, all of that is beneficial before you start thinking about pushing. And so whether you want to book a one-on-one session, like you can comment in the post or reach out to me. I'm happy to do that. Those are limited, so I can't guarantee everyone's going to get in for one of those. I also do, I also have different courses that you can purchase online that go into this in more detail and gives you a process that you can walk through. Coming up in the next week or so, you're going to see, I'm going to announce a 14-day challenge that helps you prepare your pelvic floor for a vaginal birth. And so I welcome you to join that. You'll learn something new every day to prepare your pelvic floor for birth. And so I'm just going to get to this one last question. Okay, first time mom. So are you saying to train your brain more than the body? Good question. No, both. I would totally train both. And I think that our brain is something that sounds like, when I talk to women, I honestly teach breathing primarily. And you know, when I describe that, when my fingers in their vagina and I'm feeling their pelvic floor, I often will give so many cues before I even talk about their pelvic floor. I'll say, okay, do a Kegel, and I feel what they do. And I say, relax your pelvic floor. And sometimes, and a lot of women have no idea how to relax their pelvic floor, no clue, because I've heard that they should just be walking around tight all the time. And so instead of saying like, relax your clitoris, relax your anus, relax your sit bones, I usually start with, I'm trying to get the clamp to come off. I'm trying to find what cues work for them. And I find it's everything above the pelvic floor that makes the biggest difference. So I start with, okay, I want you to breathe in and relax your jaw. I want you to breathe in and relax your chest. I want you to relax your shoulder blades. And I'll find a cue that works for them that I always say, oh, do you feel that? And it's almost like all of the tension comes off my finger. And so they're like, yes, I feel that. I've never felt that before or whatever. And so retraining the body is very kind of obvious to people, or training the body is very obvious to people because they can feel that. But then as soon as I start talking about their breath, they're like, wah, wah, how I'm supposed to practice breathing. I already know how to breathe. I do it all day. But it's when I show them that, look at how, you know, your breath can influence this. That's when they're like, oh God, I see that. Because I'll show them, look at, if you just think about breathing, I say, take a deep breath. And if they just breathe into their belly, it doesn't open the same, okay? Whereas I feel when they think about letting everything relax, that whole pelvic floor relaxes better. And so I think for them to understand their cues, and that's where it becomes individual for a lot of people, is that I say, okay, sure, your care provider or your doula or your partner is going to be sitting there saying, breathe, breathe, breathe. But do you see how thinking of this breath makes you feel so much more relaxed? So that's what I want you to practice. And so I guess, I think that that's where kind of training the body comes in, but the brain is so powerful and the brain controls everything. And so I always use the example, I have to wrap this up here pretty quick, but I just want to give you a quick example. I always use the example of parenting because, like, okay, so I have two young kids, 7 and 4, and they're irritating sometimes. Like, they're loud, they're blowing whistles, they're fighting, they're hanging off my leg. So that's like that's an annoying stimulation to me. Just like you're going to be getting kind of like an annoying stimulation during your birth, like it's painful, right? But I am quick to respond with yelling. Okay, like that's obvious. Like that's my response. Okay, and in the case of birth, like that annoying pain can be tension. Does that make sense? I don't want to respond with yelling, and you don't want to respond with tension. So what are we going to do about that? Well, I actually do meditation every day for like 10 minutes because I need to train my brain to know how to not always respond with yelling, but to know how to respond with, take a deep breath. They're really annoying right now, but let's just figure out the issue instead of yelling, because I hate yelling and you don't want to have tension. So training your brain and practicing it to, instead of taking pain and creating tension, create softness. And so the softness will help the body. So I hope that answers your question. It's both. And I think most people are like, oh my God, that sounds so stupid that I'm going to train my brain. Like this is, it is what it is. But again, the ones that are like, oh my gosh, my birth was like exactly what I wanted it. That is a common theme that I hear, is that I was in touch with my body. I was in touch with my breath and my brain. And I was confident. That's another thing, be confident. Anyways, everybody, I have to I have to wrap this up. I look forward to your questions. I apologize. I don't know why this didn't work. I will figure it out for next time. You know where to find me in the comments below. Send me a message. I'm happy to work with you one-on-one, and also kind of keep an eye open for this special with the 14-day challenge coming up. And again, I'm honored to be part of your journey, and happy to help. Okay. Best of luck to everybody. I would love for you to continue your comments so I can see them after to help you answer some of your questions, but also your comments help other people see this information. Okay. Best of luck.